Cool. Okay, so can you like start off by introducing yourself?
And I started up by what? I'm sorry, my sound is like really low.
Introducing yourself, like just share.
Mm. Okay, as loud as it gets. Again, can I
Okay,
start?
introducing yourself.
Of course. Um, yeah, so my name is Nadja. I live and I work in Berlin in Germany. Um, I have done many, many things actually in my life
Go ahead.
before I started to be a therapist, but now I work as a couples and sex therapist. I'm also a yoga teacher, but I'm not really active. Like sometimes I stop classes now, but I'm not
Oh,
very active in that field anymore. Just kind of over the pandemic, it became less and less until it kind of like just faded out entirely. But it's
mhm,
still part of my personal practice. That's why I always I put that into my introduction also with clients, because I
mhm.
feel it still has an impact on my work because I've been doing yoga for 15 years. Yeah, and you get this kind of the way that you look at things really does change over time just because of the practice of meditation, the practice of like the physical practice, because it's so slow and there's this kind of awareness. And so I always bring it up because otherwise clients sometimes tend to be a little confused when I do like breaks and I'm like, okay, let's just sit here in silence for a moment. And
Yeah.
sometimes clients are just really confused because they don't know that concept of like, let's just wait and see what happens.
You have
Um,
do you have clients that are both like do yoga and are your
a little bit from time to time they
okay.
ask for it. Yeah. So yeah, now I have my studio. We just opened 2 months ago. We had to relocate. It's been a little bit of a rocky road, but now we have our new fake studio. And so what I do mainly I work with couples actually over specific periods. It's like 10 sessions that I usually do. They bring their subjects, their themes. So it's very much my approach is very much that people come with their own story. So I don't do diagnosing, for example, something that's
Okay.
specific about my works. I don't do diagnosing. I expect clients to actually point a finger to their
Okay.
problem.
Are 10 sessions enough for like most people? Like what is something you noticed?
The main themes are, I think it's because like when they read relationship and sex therapy, I think that's why what draws most people to me is couples that have been together for a longer time. Like usually my clients will be in a relationship already for like 5 to 15 years,
Okay.
and they just don't have the kind of sex life that they want. So a lot of times it's people that have a very functional relationship, but they don't have much sex, or it's just not the quality of intimacy is just not as they wanted. That's usually the main subject. And then when I have single clients, the main subject is usually either traumatic experiences in the field of their sexuality, or finding a partner actually is a huge theme.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. People that just have been single for a long time and they're kind of looking for a partner and it doesn't work. And a lot of people just want help with that.
You know, so one thing that particularly intrigued me with your content, and I agree 1,000%, but I wanted to know more about that. The part where you spoke about anger and sex, right?
Yeah.
Could you please talk about that?
I have to laugh because to some people it's just so, it seems to be so upsetting to hear that when I say that. There's
I agree
so much
though.
backlash always when I talk about it. Mm, I think the backlash is really because people confuse anger and aggression with violence. Like I
Yeah,
don't
exactly. It's all
don't see
abuse.
that isn't necessarily the following. Um, yeah, so when I talk about that, my main point is always that we live in a culture that suppresses certain emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It's and it makes sense. I mean, we're just like a lot of people living together, so we will have to avoid violence where we can
Mm-hmm.
to be a functioning society. So it makes sense. So when we grow up, we learn that very early on, like kids hitting other kids has a specific response in the adults around, right? So parents will be pretty straightforward usually about telling children to not hit other kids and to like solve their problems in a different way. And a lot of details to that, but what happens then a lot of times is that once we are adults and we are in relationships, we have developed strategies how to not be aggressive towards other people. And it's okay and it makes sense, but you know, if you think about how when you're really, really attracted to someone physically, there is a certain energy that comes to that. There's this very like and I mean we call it passion, right? And isn't passion isn't just this one field in emotions. Passion is when I play a game and I'm excited, I want to win, but I also get very angry if I'm feeling like I'm not winning. And this is all part of passion. And it's the same for my sexuality. Like when I'm having sex with someone, it's not just like really nice in a sense. Like it's not just like super smooth and relaxing, but you also have this like fiery and it's part of your sexuality and it needs to be there because this is sexuality after all is also very instinct based.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you look at mating animals, you see a lot of aggression in them. There's a lot of aggression in it. And we have that part in ourselves. So if I suppress my aggression to a certain level, then that will have an influence on my sexuality, right? Because I uphold this picture of having to do the right thing when I am having sex with someone. And when there's like certain emotions that are coming up that I don't want to have there in my sex life because consciously I'm like, no, this isn't the part to be mean, this is the part to be nice. then that has an impact. And yeah, it changes the way that we interact with each other. And I think in the younger generations they call it vanilla sex.
Oh yeah,
Vanilla sex is like really nice, and it's a really, and I hate that sometimes it gets like a lot of hate, the vanilla sex, but it's a really, it's a very vital aspect of sexuality, but it can't be the only thing. If that is the only thing, then it creates a shadow, and in that shadow there's this blind spot, right? If this is what sex has to be, then create this blind spot where sometimes I might be angry in parts actually, right? And it goes vice versa. Like people that always have like very rough sex, let's say you're part of the BDSM community, there are also people in the BDSM community who have a really, really hard time having like very slow and soft interactions. Right? So it's not like there's one right way to do it and a wrong way. It's just kind of, is there a flexibility in your sex life? Like, can you have different kinds of emotions in there? And I think that's kind of upsetting to people because it's the same when I talk about sadness in sexual contact, that sometimes you have sex and you're sad, you get sad, it happens. Like there's this phenomenon of people that cry after an orgasm. It's
Right.
a very common thing.
Mm.
And that is just because you're opening up, like sexuality, the intimacy opens the gates of your emotions. So various things can happen. But like our picture inside of us is just that it has to be this narrow thing. Everything else is like dangerous or bad or
I couldn't agree more. And I think the people who disagree probably just don't want to accept it.
it's difficult. I mean, sometimes it's also people that just had very difficult experiences, especially
Right.
if you have like experiences with sexualized violence. Of course, it's really difficult to open yourself up to the idea that
That I
all sex is in parts aggressive.
mm,
Because there's this like in classic psychoanalysis, it's a big thing that penetration is a violent act because you're sticking something into something else. That's just like it's penetrating. It's violence if you bring it really, really far down. And open to at least accept that and that like when I say yeah, usually the weirdest point is when I say that everyone has to objectify their sex partner to have sex with them.
I mean, we do, right? I mean,
It's you have to do it because ultimately you are using this other person
mhm,
for your satisfaction.
mhm.
It's what you're doing and it's okay. The problem is just that we have a stigma around it that it's not okay. And yeah, like there's a difference whether I am non-consensually using that person to get to the point where I want to go.
Mhm.
But there is a sort of objectification. It's granted when I am physically attracted to someone, that I am objectifying them. If I
Obsession.
think of someone's body and I'm like, oh yeah, it's
Huh.
objectification.
It
It is.
is. Like,
But I think
I
because they're not used to this whole concept and maybe they also just haven't studied much about the vocabulary itself too. Like they just know it as it's used in their circles. And then I feel like, okay, well, maybe everyone needs like a lecture in analysis before I can use these words actually, because it's just like they're so loaded.
mm. I particularly love the part where you spoke about sexual violence. Just giving a trigger warning for people watching on YouTube out there. So, um, let's say after a sexual assault, right? How would somebody like be able to have sex again like every day because it's pretty scary, right?
Hmm. Mm, depends. The way that people handle these experiences is very individual. So some people dissociate, for example, and for them it's not problematic to engage in their sex pretty much the way that they did before. But so with these people, when they reach out to me, what I have to do is that I open a safe path to actually feeling into the grief and the pain and it's just really, really scary. So we'll have to like find ways to make it safe to experience all of these emotions first. And then it gets difficult to engage in your sexuality once you are open to these emotions. So that can be like step 0 before step 1 comes. And then with people who have the ability to actually feel these emotions, it's very similar. Like we need a safe space to have these emotions first. So it's kind of separating the very conscious mind that kind of guides you through this whole concept of like, it's okay to have that emotion, it's not okay to have that emotion, it's okay to react in this way, it's not okay to react in this way. Kind of like have to find a space that is so safe that that part can move out of the picture for the moment.
Okay.
So that all these emotions can roll out. Because as I always say, you will have to feel it first. There's no way around it. You'll have to like go through it to then go somewhere else. And because there's so much pain, and if we don't go through the pain, the grieving, the anger, then what we're doing is that we're always guarding ourselves, and that turns into a sort of anxiety. And the anxiety is what stops me from being with other people logically. Like there's this part inside of me that wants to protect me from the experience happening again. And it's a good thing. But if I want to come to the point where I can be with other people again, I will have to make room for all of these other parts inside of me that are just really scared and hurt, and it's just a terrible experience. And especially when the assault or the experience happened a long time ago, that can be a difficult thing to do. It can be it needs a lot of time, because like in your inner system, you've developed these techniques already, and they're pretty much set in stone at this point, if it's like 20 years ago, that this is the way that we handle it because it's successful and it works for us. It just doesn't work in that one part. But overall, it works pretty good, right? And so that's something that I'll do, is just really go through all of these various emotions, ideally. Sometimes when people have, because they're like, a lot of people have multiple events that leads to like multiple traumas. Sometimes it can be too difficult to kind of put all of this into perspective, to talk about all of this. Sometimes it's like impossible to get to that point where you tell your story, kind of, right? There's this old school ideal that at some point you'll be able to tell your story without having to dissociate the feelings that come with it, but actually tell your story in like an authentic way. But that doesn't always work. I think that ideal, unfortunately, doesn't always work, especially with like very complex traumatic histories. So there are great techniques where I'll forward clients to like EMDR therapists, or there's the sexological body work can work pretty great, because it's just about experiencing contact in like a very safe space. That can be something. Sometimes it's easier to have that experience with a stranger instead of your partner, because it's less loaded. There's less of a relationship. You have less of a history with that other person. So that can work great. Yeah, pretty much that. I'm thinking. And then I will do, because I also do a lot of body therapy. So what I will do is I will invite clients first off to get a connection to their body. That's another part that it's just really loaded. You will notice that people with sexualized trauma, they have difficulties often to feel specific parts of their body, right? If you do like a classic body scan with someone, you're like, feel into your feet, feel into your legs, blah, you just go through that body, and they will already tell you like, it's difficult to feel my chest. And then you already know like, oh, so maybe it's something. And then you can do this, that you hold your hand just like in front of the body. So do you feel this? Do you feel this? How does this feel? And then maybe, let's say it's the chest area, and I hold my hand like 10 centimeters hovering over the chest, then they will already have like a reaction to it. Just be like, it's like really uncomfortable, like,
Okay.
Or you will notice like you feel this, but you don't feel this. It's because you've made it a habit to just like leave this part out of your physical sensation. It's just a safety mechanism, kind of. And so this is something that I do, that I will like slowly work on that, integrating this part of your body again. And that is just like a very subtle, but consequently, it's just like in every session, I will notice. I'll stick with the chest, with the example of the chest. If I have, if I can't feel my chest, then usually I will sit like this, where it's just I'm hunching my back, and then I will promote this idea of like maybe change that position.
Okay.
What does it feel like if I sit like this, like really prominent chest?
Mm.
What does that do to me? What does it change? How is it like uncomfortable? Maybe there comes something new to it. Maybe I can feel new things. I can change the way that I talk or whatever, something will change. That doesn't mean that people go from this to this, but it's more like having an awareness for what's happening inside of me. And that's also a big factor in trauma work, is befriending this body again, because a lot of people feel like they have been betrayed by their body, and that's a very yeah, it's sad, like you can see in your face, oh no. So that's something that I'm hoping to change for clients, and this is also where yoga comes back into the picture.
Okay. Because how to connect
You don't have to, yeah, because you don't have to like you don't have to work on the trauma itself, right? Yoga gives you this unique possibility of working with your body without having to intellectualize everything that is happening, but at the same time it's like a very awareness-based practice. So, and that's a pretty great tool. I love that Bessel van der Kolk, he also writes in his book, the body keeps the score. He makes this connection too, which is something that I found very like, oh, I'm not the only one. Like, actually, there are actual scientists also write about this. I think Huberman also talks about this. It's pretty neat, and I think it's very unique actually that yoga has that.
I would definitely read about this too. Okay, so let's say hypothetically, I struggle to sort of express anger. Or maybe I do, but it's almost like when it comes to like being angry, you rather just skip straight to the sadness or the pain or feeling hurt or rejected or betrayed, but you don't feel anger. Like you skip out that part. Now, if I struggle with expressing anger, how do I have sex in that sort of way? Because I always struggle with anger in general, not just towards my partner, but in general.
Okay. So if I was to work with you and you told me I struggle to, so I would first of what I would do is that I would try to figure out what's the problematic part for you. Like, is it problematic that you can't really feel the anger, or is it problematic the way that you react to that anger? Like, how does that play out in your life? Do you maybe, like, there are people who just really don't feel the anger at all, as you said, you just kind of you skip the feeling, and it's great because you put that into like a timeline, because there is a logical timeline actually to these things, where say I've been like, my partner has rejected me, we've split up, like my partner left me. There is a timeline to feelings actually. So people will probably, if they have like authentic contact to themselves, they'll probably first be angry before they will be sad.
Okay.
Or you can also turn it around, but I will always look for it, like what's missing in the picture, because naturally you will be angry. You wanted something and you didn't get it, and that makes you angry. It's like as simple as that. And then of course you'll also be sad. So what I do is that I'll try and figure out, I work with the inner team just because it's a good picture. So I'll say there's like different kind of characters inside of you, and one of them is angry. Yeah,
Okay.
one of the characters, let's say, is like, I will try and give them like an actual structure. Sometimes that's I work with whatever clients come with, but sometimes that's colors, sometimes that's like animals, sometimes it's like actual children, for example. They have different ages, whatever. It's a very abstract work, but it really helps just so that I have a visual picture in my mind of what is happening inside of me, because then I get like a structure to what's happening. It's not just like rolling over me. And so I will see like, okay, who's on the table? Where is the anger? Where is it? What does it do? And something that is very common, for example, is that the anger is like the big brother to the other emotions.
Okay.
So when I would be sad and hurt,
Mm-hmm.
there's this like big brother character, the anger that
Yeah.
works as that has this like bully function, who just comes out like when we're jealous. That's very typical. Is that most people when they're very jealous, they will be very, very angry, even though they have a lot of emotions at that moment. They will be very angry because the anger is the safety. The anger is
Oh,
coming like, no, you're not doing this with me.
right.
And like it will be aggressive, but because it has a protecting quality, the
Mm-hmm.
anger is the one that kind of like saves us from this getting worse, or like the experience of being hurt and sad, that this doesn't become more, that it doesn't add up. The anger kind of like pushes whatever that factor is away that is hurting us. So it has a really great function. And that's why I always look for the anger, because either it needs to have that function or it's just too big. And some people it's just too big. Like the anger is just too big. And that's just because these people have such a big need for safety. They just like overall, they need to be safe. And that's also something that I will look for. I'm like, okay, you need to be safe. All right, I know that, like, it's really great tool to figure out that that's what you need. So let's see how first in therapy, in session, we can create this space where you are safe, which means also continually for me to just show up and be there and not just support all ideas and emotions, but actually be there as like a reliable, authentic person. And then you'll have to see how you can transform that experience, or how you can get that experience in your daily life with other people.
Yeah,
How do
okay.
you create this kind of safety for yourself? Because you can't always come to me to be safe, just
Right.
unfortunately. Because at some point you'll run out of money or out of time, or so you'll have to have tools to recreate that safety. And one part can be, if you need a safe space to be angry, one thing that I will do is that I will go into discussion with clients. Sometimes I'll actually like have kind of a fight with them. I'll do that with couples, for example. It's a lot of times that when there's two people who are both very held back with their anger, then I will give this opportunity so that they don't have to fight with each other. They can fight with me, which is a very funny experience for a lot of people, because they come out having like the same enemy, which is a bonding experience. And then they will have this like safe experience of like, oh, we can fight, and we can fight in like a safe way. And then it's very common that people next session after that, they come, they're like, oh, we actually had like a huge fight at home, but then they will laugh when they talk about it. And that's how you know, like, oh, okay, they figured out that it's okay, it's safe.
Like, what are you doing is so unique. I love it. I'm living for it. Like, and like how you said, Big Brother, like, I don't know if you watched the movie Inside Out. It feels like, um, it's basically like different. It's animated. It's just like a bunch of different emotions, each being a character. by midway.
I remember. Yeah.
I just thought of that. Very good.
And they also have like a little like a base, right? Where they meet and they have
They
like
meet
a
like in the brain. Yeah. They
yeah,
meet.
yeah, it's pretty, yeah, but it's great. It's great for explaining to adults too, but it's great when children watch that, they get this concept of like, that's how it works, actually. Like, you're not just one integrative person at all times. You have like different little characters, and they want different things. Like, you want different things.
I love that. Yeah. Okay, let's say I can express anger healthily. Everything's great. Okay, why am I sticking as with me? Okay, let's just um how do you manage your sexual relationship if you kind of have like a long distance relationship? Because I can get a little hard, over time. And
Mhm.
let's say it's like it's not like a couple of months, maybe even more. How do you navigate that?
So there's just different questions at hand always. If you have a long-term relationship, what are the modalities that you agree upon? So what I would always figure out is, are you open to having sexual relationships with other people outside of your main relationship? Like, what's the model that you're working with? Or do you want to stay like strictly monogamous? These are things that you will have to figure out. There's this idea that having more than one sex partner will kind of make it easier. That's not always the case. I feel like that's a disclaimer that everyone needs to know, is it can be a lot more difficult, actually, because there's a lot more things coming into that picture. Like, then you will have to deal with insecurities a lot. You will have to deal with jealousy a lot. You'll have to, like, there's so much that's coming into it. It's kind of like you make this one part of the relationship easier, but it might, everything else gets harder, actually. So that's just something that you have to figure out, like, what's the important part for you? Is it important to have actual physical interaction, or maybe you can work with this in a different way? So, but for the very most people that I have worked with, they usually try to be monogamous in long-term relationships. And because I think it's just still the most prominent model of relationships is actually monogamy. And what I will usually encourage is that you kind of need to stay on it. What happens a lot is that you lose the connection faster, right? Because not everyone is good in talking about their emotions, and not everyone is good in like spicy conversations can be really difficult for people. Right. Really difficult. But that's something that you will kind of need if you want to keep your sex life active in these periods where you don't see each other. Maybe you don't need that. Maybe it's totally fine for you to go like 3 months without, I don't know, having phone sex or whatever it is. Maybe that's fine. That's also something that comes up in therapy, is that people don't realize that it's actually not problematic for them. They just kind of have this picture of, this is what I have to want.
Okay.
That's why I always explain, like, there's phases in your life where you're just not very sexual. It happens. But then, because like sometimes I get requests, a lot of time I get requests from people that have babies, and they're like, work on our sex life. And then I see them in session and I'll explain that actually it's normal to not want as much sex as before, like when you're having a very small infant, because you have these energy levels and they are drastically being sucked upon, and there is not much left, and it's okay. Like, that's okay. And that's what I mean. Like, in my head I might go like, I have to be sexual at all times, but maybe I don't. Maybe if I have a long distance relationship and I see my partner every 2 weeks, for example, for a lot of people, that's actually totally okay and manageable to just not be sexually active within these 2 weeks. But they have this picture of like, I don't know, like a healthy person has to have sex at these times and so often. And there is just a lot of these pictures inside of us where it's like, this is what a normal person does. And it's very difficult to figure out, what do I actually need and want. But yeah, so the one thing is to keep it active in a way that works for you.
Okay.
So I don't know. I always think about phone sex because that's just, I think that's the most common thing for people, really. Phone sex. Or like text messaging in like a spicy, kinky way. And keeping that active, keeping that channel open can just be a task, really. Whereas like, because we have so much going on and we don't see each other, so it's not like we're constantly reminded of like, oh yeah, right, I am also in a sexual relationship with you. It's something that sometimes I have to remember, right? So I will encourage people to actually set dates, like, because when you live together, you probably have already a practice of, I don't know, date nights or whatever. And when you're in a long distance relationship, you can have that too, like actual date nights where it's kind of like we're having a date for a video chat. What's very cute, I remember one couple that would actually do like dinner night as a video chat. That was very sweet.
So cute. It's so cute though. Oh my God, okay.
It was very cute. And then just like your regular dinner night, maybe then turn into like sex. You can have that as a video chat too, or maybe just not, because it's not happening. And sometimes it's difficult for people. Just it requires a different skill to keep your sexuality active in long distance relationships, and that's something that comes up a lot. Because when I have sex, there's a lot of people who don't talk when they have sex. They just, right, they're just physically in contact. And once you take that out of the equation, you can't do that anymore. Then it gets difficult if you can't talk about the sex.
Right.
It can also work, I don't know, I always just encourage people to figure things out. It's kind of like fuck around and figure it out is really here in this, like, try the phone sex, try the messaging, try video chat where you don't have to talk, but you see the other person, I don't know, masturbating or whatever it is. You just try these things. And then at the very end, maybe you found something, maybe you didn't. And then it comes back to the decision, how important is it to have these regular sexual interactions? And if it's really important, maybe you can go non-monogamous. And if you cannot do that, then sometimes it will happen that it just doesn't work out. It happens. Yeah, it's also part of like relationship therapy, is to say that I don't work for the relationship, I work for the people.
I love
So
that. Oh, okay, yeah.
sometimes it just doesn't happen then. That's
Sucks. That can't help it.
yeah.
Well, what? But in that context, though, how does someone with a low sex drive, um, and have like and has a partner who probably has like maybe average, maybe more sex drive, how do you handle that? Because it's sort of similar like with the long distance thing, except like you're not there physically together, and like there's that boundary, right? Like where the person who has a lower sex drive feels like they owe their partner sex, and the person with a higher sex drive feels like they don't want to push the other partner to have sex. So how do you?
Yeah. Actually, so one thing that I always say first when I talk about this is that there are no two people on this planet who have the same sex drive. That's something that we often forget. There are no people that always want sex at the same time. It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
So that is probably the most common thing in sexual relationships. And I think the problems occur when when we're not looking behind the surface of these issues. So we have this like top layer of what you just said, of course, and that's already like a very sensitive way to look at it, actually, is that you can fall into these traps of your dynamic becoming this one is like really pushy, one has to always guard themselves, and that's where you're not having sex at all, hopefully, anymore. It can also be that that person who always wants sex is always like suppressing that, and then that's people that have a lot of like dishwasher laundry fights, because it kind of it comes out somewhere. But what we have is like what in most cases it happens that it becomes this like imbalance of power, where there's one person who's basically making the decisions of when are we having sex and when are we not having sex. And that person who holds that power also faces the difficulty of probably having sex sometimes that they don't really want. Like it's not as crass as like forcing yourself onto someone else, but still it's like a physical interaction that I actually didn't really want. I'll do it for the other person, kind of. And that's very difficult because that's not a great experience. And then your mind will be like, let's not do this again. Might not be a thought, but obviously you're smart. You're not like, yes, great, next time it will be totally different. There is this mechanism inside of you that will be, well, it was like that last time, so why would it be better this time? Let's just not do that. So you'll have less and less and less desire logically. And that is so common in human relationships, that we have these dynamics, and sometimes we have both. We have this like very pushy partner who is kind of like, I always see that people become more like their childish self, you know. It's like they're hanging on to their mothers, like, no, give it to me, I need it. And the other person becomes this like harsh, no, leave me. And it gets worse and worse. So this is like downward spiral, is why it's the most common theme in relationship and sex therapy. I think that's what I hear from my colleagues too, is that that's what they work the most with, is these like mismatched libidos. So what you have to do is, one, if you want more sex than your partner, you will have to figure out why. And that's a very, very difficult work, because usually instantly people will say, well, I want to be with my partner. I want this like intimate connection. That's where a professional is very helpful, because I will not go with, oh, okay. I will ask like, why? What for? What is it good for? What do you need out of it? So I give the opportunity to look deeper and deeper and deeper into the issue. And then I will probably come back to this model of this inner team, saying like, who in that inner team really needs that? And it's maybe more than one character, maybe it's 2 or 3, and they have different reasons for needing that. So it's like the validation that I need. It's the emotional validation that I need. It's a lot of it is fear driven. I'm scared that you will go away. You will abandon me. I need you to like give me the safety that you are not abandoning me. So it's a lot of factors that are actually not about sex. And I think that's a difficult thing to figure out on your own, is it's actually not about sex.
Yeah,
I am so focused on like, no, I just want to fuck you. But it's not. So that's one thing that I have to figure out on the one with that one partner who wants more sex, is why, what's the main driving factors in it. Because then once you take that out of your relationship and kind of look at yourself and what are your main motives, it's easier to be self-sufficient with these things. Right. Because that's why if you get really bad advice, someone will tell you, well, let's just go masturbate if it's so important. but it doesn't work because that's not what you want.
What about them? Right.
So a lot of times at that point, couples will just come up with like different ways to create this safety. Again, it's safety. Like a lot of things in human experience are about safety. So once I feel safe, I'm sure that my partner will not abandon me. Then I don't have to like nag them for sex as much anymore. Maybe it's about me needing to feel attractive. And then sometimes it can be helpful to have that conversation in your relationship. And then it's okay if you were like flirty with other people, for example,
Right.
just because it gives you like the satisfaction of still being attractive. Or
Okay.
your partner can signal that in different ways to you that you are attractive. Like I remember a couple, they solved this in a very like in this genius way. Where every time the person with the lower libido would just text message their partner, like, now I'm thinking of your beautiful butt and like, wish I could kiss you right now or something like that. And that really worked great for these two. Like, because then person with a higher libido was just kind of like, oh yeah, okay, great. Like you still think I'm interested. And that's it. That was all that they needed, for example. Sometimes it can be as easy as that, but the process to figuring that out is just very long. And then with the person on the other side who has like the lower sex drive, this is also different steps. So it's first you need to take that guard out of the equation usually. So create the safety of like, you don't have to have sex with someone. You don't have to like, I think very popular is to talk about people pleasing. That's a factor in people pleasing, is having sex with them because they want it. And that is like very similar actually, is that my need for safety requires me to have sex that I don't want, because otherwise I will be abandoned. So I'm scared of that. So
Okay.
same thing, just in a different dynamic. So first we'll have to take that out. So a lot of times if people have like a very, very intense dynamic already in the mismatched libidos, I will tell them to just not have sex anymore for a while. To just really take that, it needs to go away for a moment, because you can't, like when you're tight like this, first you have to get that out. So once that's out, then the guard can slowly drop. I can slowly open up towards all the emotions that are involved in that. And that's where hopefully clients can cultivate a sense of independence, being like, I don't have to have sex with you, even if that upsets you, that's okay. That's your emotion, it's not mine. I'm not responsible for you feeling upset. Like that's your responsibility. That's the most common thing. And then also very common is that people then actually notice that they don't know what they want. Like a lot of times you will have this whole process of like, I'm not responsible, it's fine, I can let my guard down, I can actually cultivate boundaries here. And then very common is for that person to be like, I don't know if I want sex at all. Oh, okay. So then it's figuring out, what is it that you want? What is it that you enjoy? And maybe, but that's actually really, from my experience, really not as common as people think, that people are actually asexual. It's very rare. It's very, very. We just have an over-sexualized culture where if you don't want, I don't know, 3/4 of the options out there, then you come to this conclusion of like, oh, I must be asexual. No, you're just an individual being. You just have your individual likings, and that's okay. So it then comes that process of figuring out, what is it that you like? What's the main factors? Then it comes back to safety, but it also sometimes it's just like kinks that they haven't discovered yet. That's also very common, that within that process they'll actually figure out, oh, I actually like his play or something
Okay.
that I haven't like never thought about. So then it's also encouraging again this like experimentation phase of looking what is it that you enjoy, and maybe you don't enjoy any of that. It's also very common, especially for people with lower sex drive. What's very common is that they are actually just very much bound to their partner's experiences. So their
Okay.
partner will have to enjoy what they are doing for them to
Mhm.
feel safe enough to find enjoyment in that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes
It's
sense.
also like a huge thing, and that's why I usually say the two main factors in sex is figuring out what do you enjoy
Mhm.
and figuring out what does that other person enjoy.
Mhm.
And these things don't necessarily always come together. That's also very common. But it's underestimated that when people talk about a very fulfilled sex life, if they are experiencing it, they will say, well, what I'm doing feels really good to me. And I know that it feels really good for my partner. It sounds very easy, but it's actually really complicated.
Okay.
It's really complicated to come to that point of like, we're actually both really enjoying what's happening.
Okay.
People tend to compromise. But like sex is not the place to compromise. It's not.
Nowadays, I think it's because it's for self, right? I mean, that's the one part where you're like, this is for me.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're so right. Like, honestly, I think it's thanks to media. Everything is just so overly sexual, right? Like, you start watching a TV show, an episode, within 10 minutes, they all eat fucking, and I'm just like,
Everyone's
what's
naked.
happening?
There's
Who's
people
like,
dying, and then they're having sex immediately. It's wild.
what? But yeah, and they'll have a fight, and then they'll have start having sex, and then people look at that and they're like, okay, maybe this is the norm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, everyone used to want and have sex, so what's wrong with
Um, okay, so I know ideally someone would say, if there's infidelity, you probably don't want to stay with your partner. But like, let's say a couple like they want to like work things out after an incident like that, but like being able to like kind of trust your partner after they cheated on you. Um, how can you navigate your sexual relationship and being able to trust that this person is like going to be.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. So one factor in that, I think, is also at the very beginning, you will have to figure out whether to stay with your partner or not. Are you open to working this out? Because a lot of times people are not, and that's okay. But I think for a lot of people, it's they forget that it's a decision to break up. A lot of people think like it's just like the logical consequence that you have to break up, and it's not. It's a decision, like,
It is.
and it's a fair decision. But that's something that people have to realize, because it also goes vice versa. Sometimes I have people in therapy that stay together and don't realize that they don't have to. It's like, well, you can also break up over this. Okay, fine. So I think it's a very, very human thing to happen, especially in long-term relationships. Something like it's stigmatized strongly, that it's like this huge thing that you can't work around, but you can. And it's also extremely common that people do that. If you talk to people in long-term relationships, and I'm talking like 20, 30, 40 years, you will barely find a relationship where that hasn't occurred ever in
Oh,
some way. Yeah, it's a
or like,
thing.
or maybe there's like that, even if it's not like physical, there's that sort of emotional cheating where, I don't know if that makes sense, like that emotional cheating where you are talking to somebody,
Also
but
physically, like everyone will tell you, like, oh yeah, okay, I kissed that one person 20 years ago. I remember. It's normal, or like normal, maybe it's the wrong word, but it's just like a very human thing to happen. because of these, like, as we talked before, of these like various factors of like, I need these things, or I feel like I want all of these things, and I get them easily handed via sex. It's like, just like, it's such a neat little package that I can receive. And that's why people tend to that, I guess. So what I really like is to find a, how would you say that? Like a metaphorical action.
Okay.
That will let the person that's like on the receiving end of that betrayal. So if I am like really, really hurt, I feel like it's very good to have like a gesture towards that, right? First off, you want to know that your partner is committed to doing it right this time. And that, I'm a big fan of like having a gesture to that. I remember one couple where the person that cheated would cut all of their hair. That's nothing that I brought into that picture. It was random. So they cut all of their hair and gifted it to their partner in a box. I don't know where that came from, but that was the gesture of like, here. And it worked for them.
What?
But it can be anything. It can be like, this was just like the most extreme examples that I'm thinking about. But there's got to be something, right? And sometimes the gesture is going to therapy, for example. It's like, yeah, I'll do this. I'll show up. I'll come with you. It will be uncomfortable, but I'm doing this. Sometimes that can be the gesture of like, I'm willing to do this work with you.
That's good.
But something around those lines. Just find something that will give you a sense of security for this moment. Like, because you're in this constant state of anxiety of like, it might happen again, it might happen again, might happen again. And that's why people also tend to separate, because they don't want to live in this fear state, obviously.
Understandable.
And so that would always be my number one point, is like, okay, let's first establish the sense of safety. And then we'll have to open up a space for the person who has cheated to actually openly talk about what happened. How did you get to that point? Because that's something that's usually has no space in your two-person relationship where your partner is hurt like shit. They will not be open to hear you whine about how unhappy. Like, they don't want to hear. You're just like, fuck you, no. I am like, don't come to me crying about how bad this is for you. Obviously, because they need to establish their safety first. So then I'll open that space, because it's really, really important to figure out what happened. I think it's really, really important to figure out what happened, because ultimately you're working on, let's not have that happen again. And for it to not happen again, you'll have to understand why it happened. And that usually brings it back to the relationship dynamics, where you will figure out, okay, that person cheated because they needed the safety of not being abandoned, and they didn't get that. So they were reaching out to another person because they didn't consciously comprehend that the abandonment anxiety is actually attached to their partner. Because we are not that clear thinking as human beings, usually. It's really like, or it might be something else. I don't know. There's like various factors, but we'll have to figure out, okay, what is it? And then you will realize that there was a dynamic before that has led to this event happening. That's very difficult for people to accept, that if I have been cheated on, I played a role in this. And I think a spoiler to that is also, sometimes your part in that play was just going with what your partner did. Just like, they maybe have brought this like huge pack of trauma and anxiety and whatever into this relationship, and you just rolled along with it. Like we're projecting all of their insecurities onto you, and you were just there as the projection surface. You didn't do anything against it, for example. Yeah, that's playing a part in it, actually.
Like a boundary.
Hey, wait. I am actually an individual being. Stop it right here.
No, it's because like, yeah, because it's like you don't have a boundary there. You're just like letting everything be.
Exactly.
So that's the problem with the relationship dynamic, that one person's not setting boundaries, or is
Exactly.
setting
Lot of
this
that.
persona that I'm okay to be like, it's okay that you walk all over me.
Yeah.
It's okay for you to betray me. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. That's extremely common, and I think also very special about dynamics where one person is cheating. A lot of times there will be repeated cheating. There it's like really, really common for the other person to not set boundaries, actually, or to not, like, because at a certain point, me as a therapist, I'll still say, like, look, if your partner is betraying you over and over and over again, why didn't you go? Why didn't you leave? What's happening here?
yeah.
Why are you not protecting yourself? What's going on here? But even in that dynamic, if you really want it, you can still work this out. It will just be a very, very long process, but you'll have to work on it. And I think that's the thing, is people confuse the, how do you say, like, people confuse the staying in relationship with working on it. Just staying together is not working on it. Like, the work that you put in is actually reflecting, maybe changing it, maybe just becoming more conscious about it, but doing something about it. It's an active thing, and staying in a relationship is a passive thing.
It's a passive thing, right? I mean,
there is a decision in it. You're making a decision to stay in it, but that's not active work. And I think that's the thing. It's like, yeah, I'm struggling to find the right word, but that's the main concept. And then physically, to get back together, honestly, that's rarely a problem in the dynamic. It's really funny, but like I said, like, passion is there's a lot of emotions in it, and anger is a driving factor. And when someone's angry, usually they have sex. Actually, it's a lot of times they didn't have sex before, and then they have sex after one person cheated, because they've kind of like separated emotionally again. They're angry. That's the perfect cocktail at having sex.
Sex again, right?
They will fight a lot. So, and fighting is like a process of separating emotionally from each other. So, and once you're separated emotionally, you're probably usually more attracted to your partner.
Attracted.
Fascinating. Yeah. So that's not very common. Sometimes it happens that people are just they have a specific need for safety that is in the way of having sexual interaction within that relationship. But it's not very common, actually, and it's also not very difficult to work on that. It's really just like, verbalizing it and being like, I'm not safe in the way that it is, and then you already know, okay, so logically you will need to find the safety, and it might take some time, but once you are safe, usually that's fine.
I think this whole thing, like for the person who like sticks around, if the partner's like constantly cheating and he's still staying, it's like this weird sort of like, I can fix you dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the dynamic of like, one person is broken and the other person can fix them, or is staying with them out of mercy.
Mercy, yeah.
Yeah, that's very common, generally very common. It's very common for people to come into couples therapy and actually having this mindset of like, my partner is broken and I accompany them to our therapy. That's really, and it's really difficult. It's the first thing that I will usually figure out, is like, who's accompanying who, and then trying to bring that to the surface, first off, that you think your role in this is just playing along, and then figuring out like, okay, so maybe it's about you too. Maybe there's something that you bring into this relationship, but that's usually very easy. It's really a 20-minute conversation usually to just be like, well, you're part of this relationship. It takes two to tango is my favorite. It's really, I think my favorite saying in therapy is really, it takes two to tango. And also like telling people, I cannot fix your partner for you. That's not my function as a therapist. And if you hold on to that concept, then you can't be here. Like I can't, then what are you doing here? Then it would be enough for your partner to come
Right.
alone.
Right. I mean, like if you're trying to like constantly like change your partner or like change everything, you probably are attached and don't love them. I mean, I know that's like uh not what people want to hear, but like I think if you're trying to constantly change someone, like you don't like what they are, I don't think that's love for someone.
Yeah, it also
So,
might be that well, love it itself is a complex
right.
concept. But it's also very common for people like the person that is in a relationship with a person that they always want to change isn't experiencing this for the first time with that partner. I'm pretty sure. They have probably been in
Okay.
another relationship before and another relationship before that, where they were also actually trying to better partner constantly. And that is because that's just the picture that I uphold of myself, that I am always the best here. And I need to be the one who knows better. That's the difficult part about it. It's like I find my safety as a person and being the better person.
Better
So
person.
there's
Okay.
really no end to that story. Once your partner is like perfect, you will find something new, definitely.
Oh God, the perfectionism is not a good
And
thing.
because you said that they don't love that person, uh, that is because you don't see that person. I think you don't
Right.
see
Right.
you can't see the person for who they are. This like it's impossible for you.
Like
And
you get like this idea of like who they probably are in your head, and like I don't know.
they should be, which is actually you. but then and that's the weird thing about it. What if they were like you would also be very unhappy, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
Because
it's
I always have this picture of like I need to be the best in everything and I always have to know best. I am very much not living up to that picture, guaranteed, because I cannot be always the best.
it can't be perfect. Yeah.
No.
Okay, so it's just like two more things before we end this. Okay, so at what point, like in a relationship, like let's say they're constantly having like conflict or problems, do you think is it like maybe common to give up or be like, okay, I think we should put an end to this, even if like both of them probably don't want it. Like, when is that time where you feel like this is probably, the right relationship?
That's such a difficult question. Yeah. Comes up, I mean, naturally it comes up for a lot of people. They want someone else to tell them, like, okay, this is your checklist. If you check 5 out of 10 points, then you're good to go. Yeah, I wish I personally, even I wish I had that checklist and I could just like make it that easy. The number one main factor is really just, do you want this?
Hmm.
Like, I don't know, it's extremely vague, but it's really just figuring out,
You
do
want
you
this.
still want this enough to put in all this effort?
Yeah, I mean, I think that requires like a lot of self-awareness and like actually going in and being in touch with like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes we just don't know. Sometimes we just really don't know. And then it's kind of like, we'll try it and you will know when you don't want this anymore. There will be, I think that there's such a strong rejection in it of like, that's it, I can't, not having this anymore. And if you're not at that point, okay, well, maybe you're really suffering from what's happening, but maybe you're still not suffering enough.
You know,
It's it's a thing. Like, people don't come to therapy because they have easy problems. They go to therapy when it's like really, really difficult, because it needs to get to that point where you're like, fuck, okay, I will reach out to someone else. Like, I'm not, I can't. And it's the same thing. It's okay. Like, you need that for healthy relationships, to be willing to accept the shitty phases, and to accept like the things where you don't match in a very great and healthy way. It's part of being in a relationship, really, because you will face very, very difficult aspects in every relationship, because your relationship is evolving, like it's changing all the time. Your life is changing all the time. You are changing all the time. So it is by nature extremely difficult to stay in a relationship. And so number one is figuring out, do you want that? And what I always have as like a backup question for people is, that's how I see this, but because I'm a very, very practical kind of therapist, like I'm very much like, I offer a lot of emotional exploring, but then you need like one thing where you can look out for, that's giving you this ultimate safety. So what I will say is, imagine you stay with this person and everything goes wrong. Everything goes wrong for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Exactly what you don't want to happen will happen. And then you separate, and then you leave that person. Can you then look back and have that empathy for yourself to be like, okay, well, I tried.
Right.
Is that where your exit point is like, well, I tried, it didn't work. Okay. But it's okay. Like, I can still have this compassion towards myself that it wasn't the most stupid thing I've ever done in my life. I'm not a total fucking idiot for hoping and for trying.
Right.
If you can do that, then stay in that relationship. And if you cannot, if you already at this point know, if this goes on for the next 5 years, I will hate myself for having stayed. I will be so angry at myself. Then leave. Then leave, because it is very likely that it's going to go wrong.
Right.
It is very likely that you're going to be hurt. It is very likely that that other person is going to fail, and you are going to fail this relationship, and you are going to fail yourself. So you need to protect yourself either way, and you just have to figure out which kind of person are you.
And man, I just love your perspective on things. Okay, anyway, so one final question. So this is probably not just like sex or relationship based. This is more like trauma based. So or this tendency of like trying to like process an emotion, maybe anger, sadness, or how do you okay, how do I put this? Okay, this feeling where you tend to over intellectualize your emotion instead of feeling it. But you feel like you're feeling it, but you're not actually feeling it. Because you're constantly thinking about it and you're like psychoanalyzing what you're feeling. How do you go from intellectualizing it to actually feeling it, processing it?
It's very funny that you asked that question, because that's like the number one thing that brought me into therapy as a client.
Okay.
I am so hyper intellectual with everything that is going on. That's such like, it's such a perfect, neat tool to not feel shit. Like people are very, very like there's a lot of people who do the exact opposite. They will be feeling so much and so constantly that you actually have to train. You literally have to train and not feel everything at all times. So if you tend to intellectualize everything to that degree where you're making yourself believe you're feeling the things that you're not feeling, first off, you will notice it. I mean, first off, you will definitely notice it. If you have that experience of trying to explain what you're feeling to other people and you're noticing that you're constantly not understood or misunderstood, then I swear, I swear to you, it's because you're not feeling it while you're explaining it. It's because if I say, I am very sad, very sad, I feel borderline suicidal, but you're talking in that way, no one's going to believe you. Of course, it's logical. So that's how you identify that you are an extremely intellectualizing person, is that no one gets it. Except for the people that know you for a really long time. They will have figured it out that if you're saying you're sad, it's because you're sad. So what you have to do is that all the intellectualizing is happening in your brain. What you need to do is to stop doing everything with your brain and start doing things with, I would say, your body. That would be my answer. I'm sure there are other answers to it, but I would say if you're always working everything up here, it's because you're scared to work anything down here.
Yeah.
Because feeling things is extremely scary to you. If that's your number one path. And feeling doesn't happen in your thoughts. It happens wherever it happens, right? That's kind of like, you will have to figure out where it happens. But one thing, if you tend to intellectualize, the very first step is to just work with the different languages first. So if I'm like hyper intellectualizing, I will keep things complex at all times. And first step, keep it easy. So I am like, what you did to me hurt me, and this is my response. Needs to turn into our ouch, ah.
Right.
That's the feeling, is just
Right.
this is the thing that you have to cultivate, is feeling it. So instead of like, because also intellectualizing is always skipping. It's skipping parts in the experience. So my partner hurt me, and my reaction will be to explain in a very chill manner how that hurt me, why that hurt me, where that came from, like it triggered something from my past experience, blah, blah, blah. And what I skipped in all that is like, fuck you. You hurt me. It hurts. Right? So that's the very like crucial part about it. What is the very first thing that's happening? Because you're definitely skipping that. And then you go back to that and you go back to that. And at first it will be very, very difficult to know what is the first thing that's happening, because you're so good at it, at skipping, that you have to go slower and slower and slower in everything that you talk about and that you experience. And what helps, I think, is like closing your eyes and just going like, where is it? So I can say you hurt me or this hurts me, but where is it? And
Body?
for example, where like, how do you feel that? How do you know that it's hurting? How do you actually characterize the pain? Something must be happening.
Right.
And this isn't even just like, because for some people, when they're so intellectual, it will be difficult to even accept that concept of like, it's nowhere in my body, it's a feeling. Then you can even explain that you have the main nerve connecting your brain to the rest of your body. So when you have butterflies in your stomach, that is that main nerve that is going through your stomach. If you have your heart racing because you are nervous, that is your brain being connected through this main nerve to your heart function. So it's real. It's very real. If I have like I happen to have this like tummy ache when I'm like really upset. Like my belly just hurts. Other people will say that they get like a neck pain because they kind of like they cramp their body. It's various things. That's why psychosomatic experiences happen. Is people that have IBS. IBS is like the most common thing. Is just a stress-related symptom because your brain is connected through this main nerve to your bowels. So you're having irritable bowel syndrome because you're just really, really stressed, which means it's your feelings manifesting in your body. That happens to absolutely everyone. So that's the thing where I go like, where is it? Where do you feel it? What's happening? And then again, yoga can be extremely helpful with that because it puts that into perspective. If I move more, if I move in certain ways, I feel it in different ways in my body. And then I get to intellectualize that again, which is bringing me safety. Like I can put words to it. I can name it. I can understand what's happening. And then I will encourage people, because the tendency is if I intellectualize things and I can't locate them in my body, what's happening, I can't really feel it in my body, then it's very likely that I also have no tools to express that with my body, for example. So let's say, to go full circle, if I suppress my anger, I logically have no tool to actually do something with it. Ultimately, that is an experience of stress, to be extremely angry, and the stress has to go somewhere. You can't keep it inside of your body. That's where it's chronic back pain can be just being super angry all the time because your body is tensing up and you're never relaxing. So if I'm really angry and I suppress it all the time, I have no tools to work on that. A lot of people unconsciously are already doing that. Like one thing, my favorite example is when I'm really stressed, I do this.
Okay.
It's instinctively, because a long exhale is how your body releases stress, and it's at the same time it gives your neurosystem the information we're good again, we're safe again. If I have a long exhale, it's because I can relax again. So you can do that. People go running when they're very stressed, is a natural response, because, and that's very funny, because you're kind of like, you're running away from the threat. It's so easy and simple, and it's the most genius thing that you can do is go running. Screaming is also a thing with couples when they're open to it. I have like the pool noodles, the swimming tools. It's like foam. It's like long foam sticks. They're actually for like elder people who do like water gymnastics or something.
Okay.
Just very long, soft foam sticks, and I'll give them to people and say they can punch each other with that, because it won't hurt each other, but they can have the aggression.
I'm so invested in your studio. Oh my God, like I just
But we all do that. So a lot of couples, for example, I do a lot of physical interactions in therapy. where it's people stay in contact and they just see what the impulses are. So, and sometimes it can be like kind of a dancing motion. Sometimes it gets like, you know, there you feel that there's more tension, and then you're more like pushing each other. And I do that a lot in therapy, but people also already do that. A lot of people do this like play fighting together, where it's not a conscious act. It's just kind of, you're just like, you know, your partner is ticklish on their belly, and you will tickle them to annoy them. And then you have this like little interaction where they're like pushing you away, like, nah, and you annoy them. And that is basically the same thing that I am recreating in therapy. Is you have different emotions and they need to go somewhere. They have to be in your interactions. Because if they're only in your brain, they're actually not really there.
Yeah.
I think they're there, they're not there. So these are all these things, like, for example, yeah, play fighting with people is a great thing. Ecstatic dance is very popular now, and I think it's the same thing.
Okay, like running, like physical
Just kind of like
Yeah.
this wild
Huh?
motion. And I think it's so popular because it gives people the tool of expressing all these different emotions without having to intellectualize them. And that's actually the main thing about it, is that you're not intellectualizing it. You're not putting it into this like acceptable frame in our society. You actually get to experience it. It's all safe. You can, like, ecstatic dance, especially, like, people can scream, they can, I don't know if they want, they can roll over the floor. It's just so many possibilities, and it's all acceptable within that space. But from being highly intellectual to going to ecstatic dance is such a long road. Like, people think like, oh, okay, that's what I have to do. Well, then that's not happening. But you can do like very small steps. It's enough to just name where it is in your body. It's enough to notice when I get upset, my breathing rhythm changes.
Okay.
Just notice I am stressed, and therefore like my breathing pattern is just shorter and more shallow. Just noticing. And then maybe if you want to change something about it, because it's also always the option of not changing anything about it because it's just safer for you. You want to change something about it, it's really, the first step can really just to exhale for a longer time, more often.
Okay.
Just that. Like, I notice I'm stressed. Okay.
Right.
A lot of people, they don't breathe anymore because that's like is a reaction of fear. Your body is protecting itself by not wasting energy. It's keeping all the energy inside by just doing very short, shallow breathing. It keeps you reactive. Like, it might be that an elephant is coming to you and attacks you, so we'll have to be prepared for that. That's basically what your body does. It doesn't make a difference between that elephant or your partner expressing anger with you. Same, the reaction, the model of reaction is always the same.
Same. Okay. Well, man, thank you so much for being here. Okay, wait, let me switch on the recording before this. Just a second.